But do you really think we should be legalising cannabis, though?
For me, it depends what aspect and kind of what way you're looking at it from. Are we talking about from a medical point of view? Maybe just as an everyday point of view?
But if you think about it, it's technically already legal for medicinal use in the UK.
Absolutely.
But is it used?
Is it used? That's the question.
Not for medicine.
Genuinely, what are the... I mean, how much do you know about that? I'd be curious to understand, like...
Well, I do know specifically there was one specific case in the news a few years back about a mum. I think so. There was a mum, and I think the son was it Billy Caldwell? The mum, he'd been allocated it for his seizures. He'd actually was one of the first people. No, he wasn't. She was using it for his seizures because it is used in other countries.
She tried to bring it back from the US, I think.
Yes, and she got caught at the border, and I think she
was
got
that
in
before
trouble.
it was legal in the UK?
I can't remember if it was before it was legal or if it was actually used for medicinal and she just hadn't been given the prescription.
Yeah.
But regardless, it's used in other countries for medicinal use.
Yeah, for sure. And I think someone in my family had a brain tumour a few years ago, and I was doing a lot of research into clinical trials and miracle cures and all of that kind of stuff. And there's obviously a lot of stories, and there's a wide understanding that THC in particular helps to alleviate chemotherapy symptoms. I think that's used already quite commonly. Yeah. But there was a lot of stories that I found in trials that are happening, particularly in the brain tumour space where I was researching, of cannabis shrinking tumours and increasing the lifespan of people with terminal cancers. You know, there was a couple of clinical trials that I was reading about at the time, and people were living for a year plus longer than they were supposed to with terminal brain tumours. It's obviously not available. I'm sure there are people who are going to dispute these trials, which is, you know, completely fair. But I think as someone who went through that and someone that they loved was going through something so horrible, you will try anything. I
was going to say, I think I would try it.
And if you are reading a story that's saying that this works, then
you're going to try it.
You'll try. Of course, if you have a terminal cancer diagnosis, then you obviously, if it's your choice to try and fight it, for sure.
I think it's quite hard because, as you said, those trials exist, and you know people saw positive effects.
Yeah.
But because of the stigma around cannabis,
you
don't really get the same like medical viewpoint. You should have been that they don't respect it as much because it's cannabis, and
which is a real shame.
You know,
because
it is
I'm
a shame.
sure
Yeah,
probably what you were saying and found, there is so much positive to come from it.
The main benefit of CBD at the moment that we're seeing is around managing anxiety, managing stress, managing depression, managing better health and well-being. It also can be seen as an alternative to, if you like, pharmaceutical medications. We do understand that within the UK, the model is based on the World Health Organization model, which is based on the medical model that we have here. However, what we are now seeing within the health and social care is a more of a kaleidoscope of different ways of therapy. So looking at, for example, social prescribing, we're looking at alternative therapies, i.e. CBD, and also the traditional medicines that people do use in regards to managing depression and so forth as well.
My fear, my concern is how it could quite easily get abused.
I agree.
I agree, but then can't any substance or anything in the world be abused if that's what you're going to do? Yeah, alcohol, cigarettes,
I guess
food.
What you're saying is how can we live our lives with that thought process maybe? Because you are right, we have seen so much.
They do have facilities where you can go to take the cannabis medicine, which I guess helps control it a bit. The misuse of it.
Yeah, I think they would probably have to consider some kind of control, because I think if you take vapes as an example, right? So vapes were initially, and still are, an amazing way for people to start, a stepping stone for people who want to stop smoking, right? And an alternative to smoking cigarettes. But if you look at how out of control the disposable vape situation has become, with so many young people vaping before they ever smoked. They potentially never would have smoked in the first place, and now they're vaping. They're they're flavored after sweets and they're all bright colors. They're trying to ban disposable vapes now. Yeah, just disposable vapes, from what I understand.
From my understanding is that it's more about taking away the color and the glitz and the glams of vapes now, which they had to do with smoking.
Young people, though.
I mean, they did the same with cigarettes and
That's
didn't,
like
it didn't work.
jelly
So they're not attacking the problem. They're kind of
working around
it. I think going back to what we were saying about cannabis, though, and maybe having the control, because from my understanding is that in Amsterdam, a coffee shop or a establishment can only choose to sell alcohol or cannabis. Yeah. Is that correct? That's from my understanding.
Not all
when
of them,
I've been.
I've been as well, and you're right. I don't think I hardly ever see them. No, I don't think I've ever seen it sold in the same place as.
Definitely when it started, I think, when the legalization happened.
I think smoke in places where you drink, but you can't buy it, purchase it, right? In the exact.
I think that's it. There's definitely something like that, which is obviously a step in the right direction to controlling it.
But if you were drinking and you were drunk, would you also want to be smoking and getting high as well? Is it like, is it one or the other?
It depends on the individual.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think you just don't want to create a space for people to drink excessively and then take recreational drugs, because then that is usually a bad combination.
But I guess that's a good example of legalizing the drug and it being, I don't necessarily want to use the word successful, but that's a country, as there are loads of countries
we're
where
talking
it's
about it
legalized
medicinally, but it's actually legalized for recreational use in many countries.
Yeah.
And from what I've read, again, I'm not super knowledgeable on the statistics or anything like that to do with it, but
now go on, hit me with some statistics.
Yes, well, in 2009, no, I have not got a clue. But as far as I'm aware, though, it's been good, hasn't it? But it's not been bad repercussions from legalizing in these countries such as Canada. I think it's helped with GDP in terms of pushing up, bringing in so much more revenue.
How regulations will be actually through law and through the House of Lords. As we know at the moment, looking at how it's actually being looked across other countries in the world. So we know Germany's recently had decriminalized it. There's also the model in Portugal. There's also the Uruguayan model. The biggest model that we know worldwide is the Amsterdam model in Holland. We're also seeing in Canada now being legalized, and also some states in America. So there is now a certain trend over the past, I would say, 10, 15 years of it being either decriminalized or being legalized. So if we look at the UK, whereby this current government is anti-drugs, and that's where their political leanings lie towards. I do recall about 10 years ago, Tim Farron, who was the leader of the Lib Dems, had it in the manifesto to actually look to decriminalise it there as well. So there is a school of thought within the UK to actually look at it that way. It is very much a political thing rather than a medical thing. In Scotland, for example, in regards to managing drugs and cannabis per se, it is seen as more of a public health approach, whereas in the UK, it's seen as more of a kind of criminal approach. Obviously, the pros and cons of that, if you are having people who are being arrested for cannabis possession, is the risk of them being criminalised rather than supporting the health issues around that as well. So in regards to actually how it's going to be going through legislation, I'm sure there will be a lot of support, a lot of conversation with other countries, how they're doing it in their countries. So in a nutshell, it'll obviously go through the House of Commons and the House of Lords for it to be passed by the law, and how they've been looking at in regards to it being, for example, some people can have a certain amount on them possession-wise. In terms of Germany, I think they say that it can be enough to roll 25 spliffs, and obviously the kind of offset of that, it could be seen as a supply as opposed to possession. One of the key things we've got right now in the UK, whereby cannabis is a Class B drug, where before it was a Class C. The flip side of that is cannabis oil is a Class A. So there'll be a lot of kind of like talking around how they can actually understand it in regards to what then remains as a Class A or Class B drug, i.e. cannabis oil, as opposed to maybe other elements of cannabis, for example, commercial Thai weed can then potentially be more of a decriminalized or a legal drug, whereas maybe the skunk cannabis, for example, could then be used as a more of a legal, as an illegal drug as well. So it's a multitude of different levels and layers to be picked out in regards to legislation.
think if we had heard about the negatives, then it would have gone the flip side and not legalization. Like you say, in regards to money, I am sure, again, not going off the stats and figures, and I know I won't see that money if cannabis is legalized unless someone wants to pay me. I'm sure there's a massive market, like you were saying with vapes. How big is that market now?
And it is interesting, you know, we're talking about drinking and vaping and cigarettes and all of that kind of stuff. I don't know that I could come up on the spot with any positives from alcohol or cigarettes in terms of like health, whereas there are potentially some you could argue for cannabis.
Yeah, you are right. It's not like someone gets a prescription for a pint of beer, but you can be, now they all get
Guinness has got iron.
Oh, yeah.
So in terms of drugs and alcohol per se, we look at dependency. So you got psychological dependency and you got physical dependency. With cannabis in itself, it is more within the psychological dependency. What some studies are now coming out with are looking at potentially with skunk cannabis, hearing stories in my experience, 25 years in the field, is now becoming physically dependent. Those particular substances, which is physically dependent, means that the body needs to have the drug to actually function and go through. Those are psychologically dependent. It's actually based on the actual cravings, the triggers, the mind wants to actually take the drug, and the actual part of that. So amongst all of that could include, for example, people actually looking to enjoy going to school, going to call your dealer, going out spending the money, the whole ritual of actually building a spliff, using the grinder, getting your roach, lighting it up, sitting down, smoking, blowing with your mates. So all of those particular items, if you like, makes up the whole addictiveness is actually using and taking the drug.
I guess the flip side of that though is that like medicinal cannabis is probably very different to the cannabis someone's buying from a drug dealer.
But is it? Is it? How much difference?
I think it is, because I think like when it's medicinal, it tends to be, obviously you have like, I don't know, you can smoke it and like vape it, but a lot of medicinal cannabis is like oils and flowers and things like that.
But if it was legalized, would you not be buying a safer product because you're not buying it, you know?
True, but then that would be a whole like price point thing. Do you know what I mean? I think like the issue is people would just buy these drugs because they're so cheap. Because if you think about it, if the like legal stuff came in, that would naturally become the more expensive version of it, and people would just keep buying the cheaper one from their like drug dealers and things like that.
To a point. Because then, again, going back to things like the Amsterdam situation, and you've got where they build culture around like a smoking culture now, and you can go to coffee shops and you can buy, and they have like connoisseurs of like the different types of weed, and like there's different levels to pricing and things like that.
It's quite an art form.
It is, right? Like if you've been to Amsterdam, it's really shocking because it's so surreal to obviously us Brits who like, you can't just walk into a coffee shop and see it on a menu, but people spend money. They don't mind. Like there's a hierarchy with obviously cannabis and like different strains, but people spend money. So I don't know why they wouldn't, if it was to be legalized, why, and of course you're going to still have street problems with buying it on the street, but would you not be, I think most people would want to, I don't know, maybe I'm just assuming.
More like if you think about it in terms of like what like culture differences, like, you know, in countries like Amsterdam's not a country, but I know the Netherlands, that's it. You know,
but it is its own kind of world.
No, but I think
I know what you mean.
I think like naturally British people tend to, when it comes to, let's say, alcohol, let's use that as our comparison, we are excessive drinkers compared to really? So we thought that compared to like, you know, mainland Europe. So I think in that same respect, you could look at it in terms of the same with cannabis, where the reason it's gone so well in Amsterdam is because they're not, lifestyle is in excessivity.
Their culture is like
you know, whereas I think in England, most things are kind of in excess.
I've got family in California and it's legal in California. Like you go and you can see the stores, you can go and buy it in the shops. And again, I don't know in terms of whether you can sell, I don't know the laws around selling it personally, but you've got people in prison in one state, you cross the border into the next state and you can buy it legally.
Yeah, I mean, talking about like American media, I recently watched Griselda on Netflix, which is obviously all
Great
about
series.
great show.
It's on my
Great
list as well.
series.
Obviously, that whole thing's about the drug trade.
Yeah,
you
but
know,
is that a
and,
bit hard? What drugs is that about, though? Is that a bit harsher?
it is like mostly cocaine, but obviously they all kind of just sell anything. So she does sell a multitude of things. I think the issue around like drugs is the glorification of it, if that makes sense. You know, I think it's that whole like lifestyle of murder, violence, you know, gang culture. And I think especially if you think about the UK media, like around drugs, like Top Boy, things like that, people love it, but it doesn't do anything to help destigmatize.
It is becoming normalized in regards to people using cannabis. Cannabis obviously is a Class B drug right now, and opposed to, for example, alcohol, which is legal. The argument is within the field, if alcohol was an illegal drug, it'd be a Class A drug, which is the same category as crack, cocaine, and heroin. So, and that's legal. So in regards to it being normalized, that's something that needs to be looked at in regards to how people can use it. So for example, are you able to use it in your home only? Again, taking the Germany model, you can't use it near schools or in leisure centres, but you can use it in certain areas. Again, the Amsterdam model, whereby they're looking to obviously go the other way and obviously not have it in terms of open for tourists, because again, that's part of maybe an example, part of their income revenue stream for the actual Dutch government in regards to tourists coming over to go to the coffee shops. So again, the actual answer in itself, again, is multi-layered and multilateral. It needs to be unpicked a lot in regards to people using it. So, for example, people can actually go to a shop, which is legalized, to go and purchase it. That could be in itself, you could only buy a certain amount. It could be, for example, you can only buy a certain amount per week or per month. Again, if you're with friends and you got a bit and your friend can't buy someone that day because he hasn't got enough, as a friend or a peer, you may want to give it to your friend. That could be seen as legally dealing to that person as well. So there's so many things to be looked at. There's no one straight answer to that particular issue.
You know?
I'm late to the party, but I watched Euphoria recently as well with Zendaya.
Okay, I love Euphoria.
And Sydney Sweeney. And
But it is, yeah.
I mean, it is really like...
If you haven't watched it, it's so intense.
It's very intense, and it's very... I think it's the epitome of like glorifying drug use. Not necessarily. There is one character, Zendaya's character in particular, she's an addict.
I found that like because the people's lives are so messed up, you almost were like the de-glorification.
So I would say for me, only in the case of like Zendaya's character, who is obviously an addict with you know real genuine problems, who clearly needs help. But I think then in the case of the other characters, when you see the scenes and they're at house parties or whatever, and they're...
Isn't that then the same as like the recreational? I mean, like Zendaya was the full-on addict, and the others were kind of like...
Yeah, but I think if you look at the kind of setup of the show, no disrespect to Zendaya's character, but Zendaya's character isn't like the cool, like Regina George character of the school.
But it's also like, but all her
cool
friends,
characters.
but all her friends accept it.
Yeah,
they don't think it's any like.
And they allow
you're
her.
using
They
it
allow
again.
her to be really close friends with a drug dealer, which I also find bizarre. But
But you're right. I think that whole show, for when I think about like if I was a teenager, if I was 14, 15 watching that. Firstly, it's something you want to watch because it's such a cool show, and
it's cool, and they're all beautiful,
and they're all gorgeous,
wearing amazing clothes,
and that's the life. I want to be like them.
But they also just make it seem so accessible as well. Like the guys in the show are like 16 years old, and they're clearly not having any difficulty getting hold of.
Can I just point out as well, if you actually really look into Euphoria, one of the main cast members passed away only recently.
Yeah.
And because of I think it's tied to their drug use, wasn't it?
From what I read anyway.
Yes.
So do you think if we were to legalise cannabis, would that change media? As in like films, TV?
Well, like how they portray
and
it?
like, you know, in the way of how they're portraying it, but also our reaction to it. Because isn't our reaction of like the horrification of something like Griselda, that's what gets it going, isn't it? But if it's legalised, boring? A bit more boring? Like,
I think potentially. It's not as exciting, is it, if you can buy it in Sainsbury's?
So we are seeing a lot of people using drug and alcohol services for cannabis, specifically young people. It is the main choice of drug for young people across the UK. There needs to be a lot more work with young people to make them be more aware of the actual dangers of cannabis, as I said before, in regards to the evolution and the growth of the brain and how it affects adolescents going to adulthood. We are seeing a significant number of people coming through to services, and in addition to that I guess, is the actual associations of using that. Are you seeing a lot more what is called multiple vulnerabilities? So what this now includes is not only are they coming in for cannabis, they're coming in for mental health, whereby cannabis can be an association, correlation to mental health. That also leads to potential involvement within the criminal justice system. So young people getting involved within probation, getting involved with the youth justice system because of dealing cannabis. Again, in addition to that, going forward, parallels, look at county lines, if young people using drugs to actually supply in different areas. So in terms of young people coming through to drug and alcohol services, we are seeing a multitude of issues in regards to cannabis, but per se issues in regards to dealing, issues in regards to mental health, homelessness, criminality, family breakdown, family discord. So it's a multitude of issues, not just that by itself anymore.
And you think about rap. You were talking about Top Boy, right?
Yeah.
That's an example. It's cool to be smoking and yeah, me too. But in rap music, everything, it's just in the music videos, and I feel like it's starting a lot younger than when I was watching.
Prime example,
things.
right? There's a line in a song, and it's totally escaped me now. But The Weeknd won a Kids' Choice Awards for "I Can't Feel My Face," which is a song about his face going numb because he's done so much cocaine. Yeah. And that song won a Kids' Choice Award. Don't quote me on what the award was, but it was a children's award. And then he wrote in one of his other songs in the album afterwards that the lyric is like Teen Choice Awards. On my face going numb off a bag of blow or something, and the irony around the fact that song won an award. They don't know what they're saying necessarily, but is that not the danger that like they're having access to these messages before they even understand what they mean? And
I mean, you think about like the songs that we listened to when we were younger, like I don't know, Pussycat Dolls,
the thong song.
Thong song. Like there's always going to be explicit stuff, but I do think we do have a problem in the UK with the glorification in music, with rap especially, because I think rap is seen as a bit different because it's more like accessible, there's not lots of rich people, I don't know, in a jet or whatever. It's people who are, in a council.
It's the target audience that certain songs and certain genres are going to hit, and you can stereotype and say that audience are more susceptible to, I don't know, peer pressure to smoke weed or things like that, because I know I've got friends that have got I've got younger siblings, but I'm thinking of the specific age that it's really hitting, that kind of rap music, that drill, that grime, everything. There's a specific age now.
Like secondary school.
Yeah. And I've got friends that have either got younger brothers or sons that are like 13, 14. And I don't know what I would do if I was a kid now, or if I had a kid that oh God, thank God I haven't got kids yet. But like,
she's spiraling.
Do you know what I mean? Right? Like when I think, and I'm like, I don't know how they stop it, because they are influenced by the music that they hear, and they're listening and they're saying, yeah, but so, and it's just becomes a culture of
it's common language.
And there's so much that you can't control.
So the cohort of maybe the majority of young people in cannabis today in the UK is probably between maybe early teens to late teens. So you look at those going into high school, going into kind of college and universities. Unfortunately, we are now seeing more younger people getting involved in cannabis use from maybe the higher end of middle school, so maybe 10, 11, 12-year-olds going through. But the majority of young people using cannabis in the UK today is around the kind of like high school age, which is quite unfortunate. And because obviously that's the kind of time when they're doing the GCSEs, the time for them to actually go forward in regards to education, career progression, college, university, apprenticeships. And again, going back to in regards to the effects of cannabis and how it affects us. And I think the key thing here also is that it's a multitude of issues. So you're looking at the society impact of it, the financial impact of it, impact on family as well, education, work. So it catches a multitude of different areas in regards to young people's development and moving forward in terms of their growth and career aspirations.